Oh, good.
All right, this is the post show. You guys hang out, talk. You want to join us on Discord? We're going to put that into chat, and you're welcome to come aboard.
Yeah, I legitimately thought that Danny was had been in the game a lot longer. I didn't realize that she joined like literally 2 months before me, because I just remember when I first started playing Eve, she was doing her podcasts. I assumed that she
Yeah.
was one of those old ones.
I want to hear. I do want to hear about this. So how did you find her? What did you think? I want to know about Ash's fanboyism.
Oh God.
Well, no, it's just I had just graduated, or not graduated, but I just left college and started working as a software developer at my first company. And so, long hours working at the computer, perfect podcasting time. And Danny's podcasts always stood out from me because she made it an effort to be at least fairly knowledgeable about what she was talking about, and you could tell that she had a deep drive to care about like the actual game itself. This was a time when lore was much more openly mocked even than today. And she did a lot of work to make sure that it was kind of a seamless transition between what players were doing and what the universe was, which I think was very valuable. And so in everything that I've done as a podcaster for Eve, I've kind of tried to model it off of those same principles.
Oh,
Thank you.
So would
Very.
you say that you're effectively just writing fan
Oh,
fiction about Dan then?
Well, uh, I don't know if I'd go that far, but maybe.
Is it the
But
50
the
Shades of
other
Grey?
thing
Is
is,
I
it her
wrote a lot of
Twilight?
fan fiction. I
I don't know if
mean,
this is how public this is anymore, but Danny used to run a Skype channel
oh
that
God.
actually grew a bit of infamy
Oh God.
as the secret Skype channel. So remember, this is before Encarna. So this was with the old PR team for CCP. So um, they were still very kind of iron walled, iron curtain. They didn't just hang out with us on Twitter or in Slack or anything like that back then. But Danny managed to have a chat room in Slack with a bunch of
The
the
Skype.
podcasters and oh yeah, Skype, yeah, and a bunch of the devs, which was like unheard of. And so who was it? Poetic Stanzel found out about
No,
it,
so
and
so
like,
no. So this is what
okay,
happened. There was another podcaster who I don't know, like I guess I didn't notice their podcast fast enough or whatever, but they had this idea that I didn't like their podcast, whatever. Even though their co-host was Cypher, who I was on the leadership team for SMA with. So I don't understand that logic because Cypher and I were really close and we talked all the time. Cypher didn't even tell me about this podcast. So he got butthurt, and so it was right when like Fozzie and Rise had just gotten hired, Verone had just gotten hired, and so it took a lot of convincing to get these devs to come in, and like Vinny, our CCP guard, was in the chat room. Ned Croker, who is the PR guy, I forget his name, was in the chat room too, and so like
That
it took a
CCE
lot of
manifest.
begging and pleading for this to happen. And like the first person who like gave me like the if there's any bullshit, if there's any drama, I'm gone was Rise. And I'm like, no, 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 it's gonna be fine, it's gonna be great. So this guy was just like just had some just shit. He just had a really shitty attitude, very combative, and lots of people noticed, and like even devs had made comments. So I tried to come to this guy and I'm like, hey, what the fuck is your problem? Like, what are you mad about? You're in a chat room with devs. And the reason why this started is because Xander Fina, of all people, like made started making comments like, oh, certain people are getting better treatment in Eve, and certain media people are getting favors and getting this and getting that. And I felt really bad. And I was like, okay, well, no, if you guys really feel like I'm getting all this special treatment from CCP, let's spread the love. I'll bring CCP to you. So I'm literally doing this to level the playing field. and to give podcasters equal access to CSN members, to CCP. Like, I'm really trying to level the playing field. And he is just acting an ass. So I try to have this conversation with him in Skype. And we have this conversation, a month goes by. I called Poetic Stancil Cray on Twitter, Cray, the phrase coined by Kanye West. And he got pissed. So finally he picked up the story, and they wrote this whole story about the secret podcast channel and how much of a tyrant I was. And you know what? Fuck you. I was a tyrant. Why? Because I was a player who got CCP to come to the chat room, and you're trying to fuck it up. Fuck you. Fuck you in your ass. I'm going to be a bitch. I'm going to be a great big bitch. And I'm going to kick you out. Fuck you. I don't care. Like, it is what it is. So, and like, drama ensued. But then, like, 3 days later, my brother died. And it was the brother that had got me into gaming. Like, literally, like, when I was 4, he had an Atari. We would line My Little Ponies up, and I'd crash into the wall playing Daytona 500, and I'd die, you know, playing Empire Strikes Back, and that's why I love Star Wars and space so much. Like, he really got me into video games to the point where my mom bought me Sesame Street video games for his Atari. And, like, when my brother, like, and he died suddenly, like, he went to the hospital and 4 days later he was dead. Like, it just fucked me up. And I was like, man, I've tried to do my best for this community. And, like, I've literally brought CCP to your step, and you're going to shit on me right there.
Hey, Johnny.
So, sorry, family show. This is after hours, though.
Hello.
But yeah, that's the story. That's the story of the secret podcast channel.
Wait,
My point-
that was a family show? Was I like not supposed to swear or something? You gotta.
Yeah, Ash, you can't ask any more questions.
But this is why the podcast was so exciting, because it was just literally me ranting from thing to thing. But yeah, I'm animated. What
Everyone
the
loves
fuck is an
drama.
Atari? You don't know what an Atari? Oh, you know.
To be fair, I only know of Atari as a third-party developer.
You're trolling me. I don't know. I'm not going to acknowledge that.
I've been waiting for an EVE Online drama YouTube channel to pop up one of these days.
I'm sorry, but
Well,
Big
you're
Star's not
here.
Interested.
Reddit already exists.
Yeah, the worst drama
Well-
isn't from the players. The worst drama is the media or community people surrounding Eve. They're the most dramatic.
You've obviously never seen the Evo forums or been in the CSN.
No, YouTube is a unique platform, though, when it comes to drama and discussion. Believe me.
Oh, back to the
Yeah.
back to the new player thing. In the time we did the show, we had 6 people actually join Brave in just an hour. So I don't know how that compares to Karma and Pandemic Horde, but that's a lot of people to join every hour.
That's pretty crazy.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
actually looking at
busy.
the Horde recruitment page right now, and there's about 20 applications unprocessed.
But so, what is your guys' like retention looking like? Like, what is your guys' 24-hour login uptake?
It's way too early to tell, but I mean, literally the comms have doubled, which is how we really measure activity. How
Right.
many people are in the main comms channel, and it's huge numbers. I mean, Horde is seeing the same numbers we see into how much comms they have, and it is doubling the amount of active pilots we have in Brave.
It's not, in our case, it's not even just comms, it's also number of pilots getting on kill mails, either their own or someone else's, have just simply doubled, just outright doubled.
Yeah, Aileron's picked up at least 100 new pilots, and we're seeing 80 to 90 people logging on a day, which, if you think about it, we had less than probably 50 active pilots before this whole thing started. So,
And
Yeah.
we've not even gotten into the area where people actually need to start plexing. So it's going to be interesting to see what the numbers are when people are moving into that area.
We actually had to purge people because we were actually getting awfully close to the maximum number of pilots you could have in a corporation.
again,
Yeah, again. And believe me, my director This poor girl is a trooper, and it's a very manual job, apparently, having to purge 2,000 people that haven't
it's horrible
for months in some cases. There's
also it lags.
there's no way to,
It
it's
lags.
horrible. It's absolutely horrible.
We
No way to
Twitch-
just like purge people saying, oh, if you haven't logged in after X amount of time, auto purge. Nope. Manual job. It took her like 4 or 5 hours apparently
Not
to
only
do
is
it,
it
and she has to do it again
Twitch
this week.
streamed Purging Brave when we went from like 12,000 to 2,000. We Twitch streamed it for like 5 hours straight.
Oh my god.
It's not only a manual process, but it's a multi-click process. There's a confirmation dialogue that you have to click for every single person.
So here's my thing. So CCP put out this new update with the intention to bring in all these new players. I assume they did nothing for corporation management or alliance management.
So this is sort of the running joke, and something that my director and I actually got mad at one of the developers pretty badly when we were at Vegas. They're bringing in these new players, this new system, this new trial. Every one of these things is only a good thing for EVE. But from our point of view, they gave us exactly 0 tools needed to help manage these pilots. The corporation window is still the same piece of fucking trash it's been for 12 years with no upgrades.
They did change the roles and titles management pages. Like there was a UI pass that happened about a year ago, but it was on CCP's roadmap of like corporation management revamp was up there with SOV revamp and other stuff like that. But we got this totally UI overhaul, which didn't really do much because the functional mechanics weren't that different, and that's where most of the problems are. And they're like, oh, we're going to look into it more, and then we literally haven't heard anything about it in like
it's something we've been hearing every year for the last 12 years, at least since I've been playing the game. And that, like was said just previously, just to simply boot one person is a multi-click affair.
So, but here's okay. So here's my question: is there a thread open on the forums about corporation management? Are you guys actively like petitioning Fozzie and CCP Fox 4 and the UI team?
I
think they're well aware of the issue.
I don't know.
I'm sure it's a legacy code type of thing, but
absolutely.
I think they have to prioritize, right? It's not every group is dealing with these issues. There's probably a dozen groups large enough to where this is a fucking huge issue, and the rest of the corporations, it's a non-issue. So I think
I don't think it's a non-issue. I mean, it's not just in the case of like simply recruiting or unrecruiting people. Whether you have 10,000 people in your corporation, whether you have 10 people in your corporation, yes, okay, in our case, it's a train wreck. In the smaller corporation's case, it's a minor annoyance, but it's still an annoyance that shouldn't exist. And this is something that I know has been brought up every year. I have personally brought up to CSM members across more than one CSM, and it was something that I know my directors personally brought up, including my CEO, to developers while we were at Vegas. I mean, this is something that if CCP doesn't think that this is a priority, an absolute priority, then I think they're living in this weird little bubble about what is actually on their whiteboard, because it's more than a minor annoyance. Even for a slightly larger corp, like a 50-man corp, it becomes an issue.
Well, like I said, it is reassuring that it was like part of the big three, right? SOV revamp, structure revamp, corporation management revamp. Those were like the big things that Siegel noted in her vision, her now kind of infamous vision, as we march forward. And all three of those things have kind of made progress. And the other symptom that I've noticed is that the Citadel management tools are all totally different and relatively significantly more functional than the corporation management tools. And so I wonder whether or not that idea of like the buckets and the access lists and all that stuff is going to be transmitting over to like standings and corporation management. They're using it as a test bed. That's what it feels like to me. But obviously they're not there yet. But that doesn't mean that they're not working on it.
I agree with that statement about the Citadel. That the Citadel management, so like the front end of the management, like managing the fuel, managing the equipment, managing anything like that on a Citadel, superbly fantastic. I wish we had that for pauses. The back end, however, is the big problem. So one of the things that Horde is known for is, we pass out ships, we pass out skill book packs to every new player that comes in that asks for it. The problem is this leads to the requirement of a lot of equipment and a lot of logistics. Fun story about Citadels. You cannot track assets in Citadels out of game. You can't even track them in game easily, but out of the game, it's impossible. So in a hangar, a corporation hangar in the Citadel that has over 1,000 ships in it we don't actually know how many is in there without having to go look, and we don't know when it needs to be filled up again because CCP has not released the tools for this.
Look, these things are great, and we've brought them up with CCP. But at the end of the day, it's just, is it possible? Is it something that they're willing to spend time on? And that's probably one of the biggest things that the CSM and the public in general runs into when they talk to CCP. It's like, what kind of return in gameplay can they expect from any changes made?
But Jin, 6 months down the road from Citadels coming out, where CCP has a vision that these new structure types are going to replace pauses, they're going to replace outposts, they're going to replace stations, and all the above, we're sort of stuck in this limbo where these things are coming out, and at the end of the day, they actually have less functionality than what we had before.
I will say that we actually had a really interesting discussion with CCP about how much information the API should provide in the first place, and how powerful it was, and how and if things needed to be changed there.
I think that's a whole other discussion, and I think you're right.
I have no opinion. I have no shit about the API. I stayed well the fuck away from that, mate.
I think there needs to be feature parity, even going beyond the API. One of the biggest problems we have is in our system where we have a goddamn Keepstar, and we're passing out ships by the thousands per week. One of the biggest issues we have is there's no insurance in the Keepstar. That we actually have to tell people, you want insurance? You have to dock at the station that is literally named, don't dock here, this is a kickout station.
Well, isn't that on their top agenda? I know that Dropbox, I thought insurance, and there was something else that was their big targets for structures. So
to say something about this, the CSM actually has a list of issues with the Citadels that we presented to CCP on request from 5.0. Literally at the top of that list is insurance in Citadels.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that I think that are not there yet, but that yet is actually getting to be a smaller and smaller word as we move on, which is kind of hopeful. Obviously, Ascension was a huge deal, and it's also very obvious that there's a lot of things that just got pushed out of scope for Ascension in order to really prioritize on the core pieces that they wanted. So I'm excited. It'll be interesting to see what December and January is like. Honestly, I'm actually interested. The Dix, the new bomb launcher, anti-bombs are going to be coming out in December, which I was actually surprised about. So I think that they're further along in their timeline than they implied at Vegas. At least with those the things that they talked about in Vegas, which would be the new Citadel changes, the Dix, and the very limited stuff, because they didn't mention they didn't really give any details about drilling platforms or any of that kind of stuff, and that's still listed as winter, which they only have a few more months before they have to delay that.
I live in Canada, so the winter could be up till August.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's winter in Iceland, which I think somebody pointed out is July or April.
Pretty much, yeah. In the case of these new defenders or dicks or whatever we're actually going to end up calling them, oh man, I really hope we don't call them dicks. Ugh.
I'm calling them dicks. I don't care, even though that's not the actual name of them now. I'm just going to call them dicks forever because that's what they were called originally.
It sort of solves it's classic
a revamp of the Defender missile system so that it targets bombs instead of missiles.
So are interdictors not a thing? Because
no, dictors are a thing. Yeah, this is different. This is basically they're changing Defender missiles so that they fit only on destroyers, and they when you click them, they fire off a single charge that targets a random bomb within 30 kilometers and neutralizes it. So the old Defender missiles are gone. This is the new Defender missiles. This has nothing to do with dictors, except for technically it fits on dictors.
As an older player, I'm sort of reading up on this, and it comes to the classic case of good idea on paper, execution question mark, because there's a lot of questions for this that are a little weird in the case of, okay, you have, will one defender definitely kill one bomb every time?
Yes.
That's question one. Okay. Now the other question is, bombs have corp tags, so they're owned by corps. Will you be able to filter out your own bombs,
No.
for example?
I doubt that.
No, I do.
Of course.
Basically, when you click the button, this is how it was described at Vegas. When you click the button, it chooses a random bomb that is somewhere within 30 kilometers, regardless of what that bomb is, and then it seeks out that bomb and stops it. Now, that means that if other people click their defender missiles during that same span of time, the same bomb could be randomly chosen by multiple defender missiles. But it is completely agnostic to who owns the bomb.
Personally, I like it because it previously, if you knew that there were bombers in the area, it like massively discouraged any sort of aggressive maneuvering, because you needed to be set up to avoid basically getting bombed. If there was a point at which you weren't set up, you were always at risk of being bombed and having that kill you. This provides you a way to move aggressively and, be able to not get bombed to shit, which is good for specifically for low SP groups like Horde and Brave, actually.
But the question is like, how effective are they going to be? Okay, if you have one bomb coming at you, sure, but generally speaking, one bomb isn't going to be an issue. So if you have 5 bombs coming at you and you have 5 destroyers fire their defenders, and all 5 hit one bomb or all 5 hit 2 bombs, and you still got 3 bombs coming at you, you're still talking about wiping out a large portion of the smaller ships in your fleet, if not all of them.
It's not meant to be absolute protection. It's meant to be a counterplay, right? If you want to bring 50 destroyers with these things, then no bombs are going to touch you. But people aren't going to want to devote that. So don't expect it to be this perfect protection. It should be enough that you can fly battleships and null.
I don't know if people are actually. I would totally devote 50 people to killing bombs.
Right. You and I absolutely will, and that'll be great for us. But people are going to have to make choices, and EVE is about choices. So don't expect it to be this perfect, meets all your scenarios. There's going to be hard counters to all this stuff. And
also, the problems with battleships are not with bombs, despite what people would tell you.
Let's hold on. Let's take a step back and realize what this is. What this is a valid skill-based role for alpha clones in larger fleets. That's all it is. Is giving alpha clones. It's not
just alpha clones. It's not just for alpha clones.
Right, but that's my point.
Every nullsec fleet there is.
But what I'm saying is that what it does is it is a problem that is solved by numbers, not by power, in a destroyer class level, which means it is a valid or very good application for alphas in a battleship fleet, which would otherwise be relegated to what? Tackle?
Yeah, I mean, it's fleet composition. I mean, it's going to change the way fleets are composed. You'll see new doctrines come out that would be very vulnerable to bombs in the past that'll be able to hopefully fight here, but that's not going to be perfect. And the random number generator of EVE is going to play a big part.
I just like the number of plays and counterplays that are possible. It's kind of like the command the micro jump field beacon, right? Or drive with the command
micro jump field generator.
Yes. It's one of those things that we know it's going to have a lot of effect, and we can kind of theorize several different maneuvers that'll be used. But it'll be interesting to see what happens when it actually hits the battlefield.
Anyway, guys, I have to dip out. I've got fleet to run. Peace.
Later, Jen.
Bye, Jen.
And this is where the video feed goes bonkers.
That's all right. It was frozen. It was frozen for like 5 minutes. So.
All right. Well, I'm going to check out as well. I've got to go have breakfast with my wife because it's still early here in the People's Republic of California.
Latest, Dunk.
Danny, are you still here?
I am, but I don't want to offend anyone. Sorry, I say a lot
No,
of bad
I
words.
wanted to ask you questions about like, if you're going to get back into Eve, are you going to consider getting back into the meta game such as podcasts or videos? Because I remember you did a bit of both back in the day.
Yes, yes. Well, I did some streaming with Eve Radio, and then I tried to get into the foray of videos. Like I had, like I did a couple commercials for, the Eve tournaments and other videos.
Yeah, you did most of the trailblazing when things were very slow in the meta when it comes to video stuff, and you basically kicked that off.
Really?
Yeah, it was the same era as the early days of many of the streamers that are now active, right? I don't know if you remember that, Johnny.
I'm sorry. It's overwhelming and a little embarrassing, but it's really cool though. It's really cool to see. I mean, like I remember having like Johnny on the podcast and talking, like so the most memorable conversation that I've had with Johnny, we were just rapping and we had this crazy idea to like have everyone send in videos of this day in the life of Eve. And I was like, oh, you should totally do that, Johnny. And he was like, yeah, I'm going to do it. And then like a couple months later, CCP teamed up with, was it MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art, to literally do that.
Yeah, I remember
And
that.
so, yeah, do you remember that conversation?
When I heard about it, I'm like, okay, forget it. Forget that idea. CCP would do a better job.
Exactly. But it's like, you kind of wonder how much, like silly conversations on the side, get into people's ears and, they're like, oh, that's a good idea. I'm gonna just take that. But then, you have other instances like with Tech 4 where, we work directly with CCP Care Bear to present the storylines correctly and to make sure that the show narrative matched what he was trying to do in the game, and that we were highlighting, things that were going to help him with his events. And it's really cool, and it's cool to see guys like Verone was his in-game name, but what's his CCP name now?
Falcon.
Is it Verone?
It's Falcon.
Looks like the same guy.
Yeah, it's
Huh?
the same guy.
Oh, and Ash, I don't know if you noticed, but
CCP
I think
Falcon.
Matterall just made your
Yeah,
dream come
Falcon.
true.
What?
I think Matterall just made your dream come true. Now you are actually the host with Danny.
Talking to you is like time travel because the things you're discussing are things that happened like 3 years ago. Like
In the
Oh.
before time, in the long, long ago.
Back in my day.
it's like you went into a what is it? A chamber. What are those things called? You're frozen.
Yeah, like a
Cryogenic.
time capsule.
Yeah.
I'm literally Walt Disney right now. I'm Walt Disney walking out, and I'm like, yeah, where's my Alpha Fleet at? Let me jump in my scimitar, go rep some drakes. It'll be great. Yeah.
That's what
Oh,
happens
God.
with games like
SC, can I bring my Drake? Still a thing, by the way. That's
Yeah, you
that
can
hasn't
Make
gone
Drakes
away.
great again.
It's an Eve meme now, though.
Yeah,
Really?
that's true. That's true. It used to be like said unironically.
Yeah.
No, like that was serious. Like Drake Fleet. In fact, I wrote a parody song about Drake Fleet because they were like the thing. They were the ish. Like every fleet had a Drake Fleet, had a Maelstrom Fleet, had a Scimitar Fleet. Like it was all about Alpha ships and Titans and
It's all gone now.
Well, actually, let me ask the group because I haven't seen very much of it, but I know with command bursts being added in, there is some speculation that battle cruisers were going to be awesome again. Has anybody seen that actually occur?
I've seen people flying battle cruisers around high sec, but not much low sec action.
We'll see. We'll see. I think that command bursts, people haven't quite digested it 100% yet.
I see that annoying effect light up my screen occasionally. Can you be any more obvious that you're using command modules?
No, I'm pretty sure they found the most obvious way.
By the way, Danny, I'm going back to my roots with a bit of like those like PvE guide videos. So you'll see some of those if you're subscribed.
I
have a
noticed
suspicion
that.
Sorry, I was just going to say I have a suspicion that the content creation is going to be very explosive for the next few months because so many of the old people that are coming back used to be extremely productive.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so here's the question. Like, what's the landscape now with like the media? Like, who's on the scene? Like, what are like if perchance I were to come back into Eve and I asked for, blog or podcast recommendations, what would you say?
So there's 3 major news outlets now that are all pretty functional. There's the Imperium News, Eve News 24, and Crossing Zebras. But honestly, what I would do is recommend going to totaleve.com. They have consolidated basically every RSS feed of Eve interest into one website now. So that should be a pretty good launching platform for you to find who's doing what.
Huh. So how do you, like, if you were a media person starting on the scene, how would you get involved with that?
So most of the people at this point, one of the nice things is Discord is such a kind of open space. So pretty much all of those places have a public Discord channel and, have people that you can get in contact with.
Plus, you totally left out the whole media war and drama stuff.
I'm talking about where we're at right now.
There's a media war and drama?
We're going to go so far as to say the Imperium.news and the Crossing Zebras don't really like each other much anymore.
That's only semi-official, right? It's just to create the drama so we have something to talk about.
But you know what? That there's one every generation. It used to be Eve News 24 and the Matani.com, and before then it was
there wasn't anything. It's just Eve News 24. But no, the thing is that
I'm struggling. I'm like, no.
Hang on, wait. Did I leave someone out? No, there's not been anyone.
Last year there was a fairly big public war between the Imperium and roughly everyone else, and that really galvanized the media. And I think that we're only now just kind of recovering.
Yeah, and then we got the whole thing with the casino bans, right? So that brought in a lot of tension. But as everyone knows, in Eve, we're all very incestuous when it really comes down to it. So the animosity is more in RP than it's in character than out of character, right?
Yeah, this is actually my first time appearing on the Matani.com type stuff or the Imperium stuff since I famously made my drop the mic for talking at stations.
Well, it was in the wake of a serious Smug Spin Master episode, so I think it's almost valid.
Yeah, I mean, it was fun.
I think I heard about that one.
It was an interesting time. Well, so what happened was basically the gambling got removed from the game, effectively. So organized gambling got removed from the game. And as part of that, also one of the major gambling houses, I Want ISK, most of their leadership staff and anybody really attached to them got banned, their ISK taken, and it was a huge hubbub.
What caused this? Because I mean, when I left, that's
what I'm getting to. So the reason why this was such a big deal was because World War B, which was the biggest war in a long time, started because I Want ISK funded the enemies of the Imperium to rally together, and to the tune of just trillions of ISK, I think a week, to wage war on the Imperium. So when the casinos got banned, the Imperium, in particular the Mittani, took this as kind of a validation that the war was improper or tainted somehow, and then proceeded to kind of connect the dots between that and anybody who's received ISK from these agencies, including a lot of streamers, podcasters, bloggers who, in the last year, sponsorship from these casinos had become kind of a big deal as like a starting point for a lot of content creators. It's like, oh yeah, create your content. Here's a few billion ISK in order to do it. And so it made a lot, people comfortable. And so when all of that burned after the war with the ban that came with Ascension, there was a lot of kind of debate, or there's a lot of, like, in my opinion, undue lashback towards a lot of content creators who up until that point had been accepting money from those agencies.
And it was tied into the whole thing that I think that the two buzzwords that were ringing, at least from my inside, was unassailable wealth and dirty ISK, and it was the themes of the day, right? And then there was the whole conclusion when was it the Valve thing that happened, and then CCP actually decided this is not really such a good feature to have in game because it puts them at risk in real life matters, and it actually messes up a little bit of the in-game economy, right? So the loss is that a lot of content creators don't have easy access to money and need to, I don't know, get donations or create new streams of revenue, which I personally think is a good thing because it brings us back to some of the old ways of doing things, and I think that's a good thing.
I have yet to hear a content creator, and I'm not saying that this doesn't happen, but I've yet to hear a content creator that's like, oh, it's over, I'm not going to do it anymore, or anything like that. Like, pretty much most of the content creators have responded with, we're going to do it the same way as we've always done it. Most of them worked before there were sponsorship from casinos, and they'll continue to do it after.
Yeah. Like, I mean, as someone who, was self-backed, I guess you could say, like, I totally get it. Like, I get the lure. I mean, there is a lot of work and a lot of effort that goes into creating content. And I mean, you're pouring hours and hours into research, into post-production, somebody like Johnny who, really goes to create content. I mean, I can't tell you how many hours like Stan and I would be up late, working, trying to get the script together, trying to get the sound effects just right. So like having some ISK to back you up, like I can totally see the lure, but at the same time, it's EVE Online. Like,
I could just say that it's a nice development to go from, I think the Tribune used to pay like $5 million for an article to now the payment is $250 to $500 million per article. So there's a lot of things that's developed in EVE, right?
Yeah.
Hey, Danny, back when you were playing, were the infinite use buddy links a thing?
No, okay. I think those are just started.
Ever since that happened, I haven't had to like go out and actually rat for ISK to help myself get ships to make videos, because I just put one of those buddy links that can be infinitely used by as many people on every one of my videos, and eventually the rewards start coming in. So I generate at least like 3 or 4 Plex a month just passively from my videos.
And that's going to be even more interesting with the new recruitment thing that CCP is rolling out, right? Because then not only is it going to generate ISK for you, it's also going to generate skill points for the recruits, and that really brings it home. It's a whole new thing because that thing was not maybe as widely used before.
Yeah, it's so crazy important now. Like, to the point where I have people in my stream, it's like, oh, you didn't use a buddy invite and you're 2 days old? Scrap that character, make a new one. If your character's less than 2 weeks old, you might as well just start over with a new buddy invite.
Yep, especially with mine.
Exactly. Yeah. If you lose,
I
oh
didn't
man,
use
I've got
Buddy
2
Invite.
plexes. I've got 2 fucking plexes waiting.
Yeah, you were raging at me because I actually didn't do that, and I was not a few days old, right? I'm a little bit older than that.
I didn't use a Buddy Invite, but like I said, I didn't even get through like a couple hours of the tutorial. But that is, I mean, kudos for CCP for doing that, because I mean, you know, like when I would stream, you would inevitably get someone chasing you or whatever. So, you know, if you can bring in new blood and get, you know, some bonus for that, that's, you know, kudos to CCP on that.
No matter all your keying up.
Yeah, they honestly they needed to do that, you know, because if they didn't, it would have been awful for the game. Because like CCP does so many things so late, it feels almost too late to get something changed.
And they have a very strange way of rolling things out. Like this whole thing reminded me that one of the things that I've been wishing for a long time is an import-export to the character creator. Because when Ash told me, well, you forgot to use the body thing, re-roll your character. Yeah, but I just spent an hour and a half on actually making it look nice.
Right?
Yeah.
Like,
because I really can't be bothered to re-roll when it's that difficult. And it's the same if you want to, I don't know, have a secondary character that looks exactly like your main or something like that. It's such an obvious feature that should have been in there since the beginning. And you can also talk about all the meta stuff that you could potentially do. That there's people that really like to do the whole tweaking of characters and making them look good or making them look exactly like a real life person and things like that. Many people might not want to do that or can't be bothered, but they might actually want to pay for it. And then an import-export feature would be vital.
you know what? A good model for that would be Saints Row. Because Saints Row is like that, where they actually have like this database where you can upload your characters and trade characters, download, import, export, what you're talking about. But I mean, and that's the thing, like when I created my little test account yesterday, one of the things that I showed my boyfriend was just how in-depth the character creator was and just how gorgeous it was. And I mean, I know there's a lot of controversy steeped in that with the whole World of Darkness thing and, you know, oh, this is a test platform for this thing, and then the walking in station's never happening, blah, blah, blah. But I mean, it really is a gorgeous character creator, and you can do some amazing things with, you know, the facial structures and all that stuff. So in that vein, cosmetics for character and clothes.
You're roboting a bit then.
On what?
You were roboting.
Oh, I think my headset's dying. But what I was gonna say is the Orem store for cosmetics. How was that like? And let me get this headset thing figured out.
They've gotten back on track with the Orem store. It's now skins, which are color customizations to your ships. And for the last year or two, we've had some pretty basic skins, although they just rolled out their first kind of premium skin on the Confessor, which is a new destroyer type.
Yeah, they've really moved into that. I think Danny was thinking more about the Barbies in space stuff, which is kind of moved, right? When you don't have any walking in stations.
Yeah, well, there's a lot less like character customization stuff put on the next. I don't think that any real new clothing has been added in the last year or two, but they have made sure to put at least a couple pieces of clothing into every event. You know, just like either a hat drops or a shirt or something like that. So they still add in new clothing content, but it's less
and it ties into the thing that we just got those things from Project Discovery, the new drop suit thingies. But that's kind of weird when we don't have dust anymore. So I'm hoping that there's some sort of, I don't know, portability into the Project Nova if that actually kicks off. And it ties back to the whole import-export thing, right? I would like to actually be able to export how I look as Caleb, right? And then import it directly into Valkyrie or into Nova. So it's the same character. Or ideally, I want to be able to log into those games with exactly the same account.
That's their goal, to have a single use character for multiple games. That is their goal, because they mentioned that being what they intended. But of course, it's more of a technical hurdle than I imagine they assume.
But it's not been touched upon since, what was that old, the former CCP dev that presented that vision in what, 12, 13?
Oh, the one clone, the one infomorph, multiple clones for Dust.
Yeah, the one
Valkyrie.
universe thing.
Yeah, I don't think that they've necessarily talked about that since even Nova's been announced, but I don't know. It'll be interesting to know, because like Valkyrie isn't connected. It doesn't look like Nova's actually going to be directly connected to the Eve universe like Dust was. So maybe it's far enough. I think it's like still pipe dream level for them, but who knows? One of the things that I thought was really interesting, though, if you guys remember, there was that tech demo that was done in Unreal Engine 4, which is what Nova's done in order to do VR, and they used Eve model, like Eve characters. I think it was like Angry Concord guy or somebody that they used.
Yeah, and it was retweeted by Torquefront. It was a demonstration of porting Eve models directly into Valkyrie's VR environment.
Right. So my question at that point is simply how straightforward of a process, how trivial of a process can you make that transition? And if the answer is that you can take a model from the Carbon engine and create a translator and put it into the Unreal Engine, then that unlocks all kinds of possibilities.
Yeah, and that means that I should start reinvesting in those character resculpt modules.
Possibly.
If they want to make it more interesting for their already existing Eve community to jump on their other products, then they need to make it possible for us to use our one character to interact with those products. Otherwise, we're going to feel less connected to those games. If we used our character, like if I used Johnny Pugh, my character, to play Valkyrie, I would feel far more connected to that game experience than if I had to create a whole separate identity to play it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting because I was shown something the other day that I actually didn't have any idea existed. On the PlayStation 4, they used to have those prep room thingies where you were walking around in a staging environment, basically. What was it called? PlayStation Home or PlayStation Live or something like that. You remember, right, Ash?
Yeah, I thought it was for the launch of Dust or something. One of the things they added to the PlayStation had a really crappy social physical space back in the day when people thought that Sims Online was going to be good. And it had a room where you could play a little Eve mini game, like one of them.
Basically, it was walking in station prototype, exactly the same as the original prototypes that Torfus showed us back in before the Age of Wrath. But it was actually a working demo, and it made perfect sense that was where it should have trended, right? You could go around this environment and meet other, Dust players, and it was skinned exactly like stations in Eve.
I still remember watching a video, I can't remember which demo it was, walking around a station, going into a bar, and they saw like mini games over here, of course, the bar and dancers and whatnot. I remember that video. I'm like, why hasn't that happened? It would bring in such a different audience to the game who just don't want to play as spaceships in space. They want to play as spaceship people in space who happen to also fly ships.
I don't know if you remember, but one of the major problems, I think, if I'm reading this right, is that Haldefanner, the technical guy that actually made the Carbon stuff a thing, it was very much pushing the limit of what hardware could do back then. So the vision was a little bit technically impossible when CCP wanted to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you remember, but a lot of people had their graphics cards screaming and overheating when they launched the Carbon engine.
Yeah, that was an issue. I've said this before. So like back then, CCP struggled from wanting to become bigger than they were, right? Like, so everything was going to be the thing that puts them on the map, right? So Dust 514 was going to be this big thing that brought in millions of people from the first person shooter genre. And the Carbon engine was going to be a rival of Unreal Engine and was going to actually be, proven in these 3 different games through these 3 different methods, and then was going to be licensed to other companies. Like that was their big plan, and obviously, not a lot of that came to fruition.
No, they were shooting and trying to launch new product development stuff in all directions at that point, and a lot of them seem to have been a little bit illogical and upside downy. As I was talking to Jintan about the other day, that the fact that you buy something like White Wolf and start looking at a World of Darkness product, but you don't actually get the White Wolf people to make a pen and paper role-playing game for EVE, that just seems such a waste of talent.
Don't worry, Seagull will save us.
Oh yeah, I know. Seagull's plan is perfect. She's just a little bit too slow in the rollout for my impatient personality.
Well, that's not. I mean, development time takes what it takes. It's not like, it's not like they're gonna just. They're not sitting on their laurels. Their throughput is probably at pretty much maximum right now.
Yeah, but anyone that knows the storyteller universe knows that when it comes to actually making an EVE related pen and paper game, it would basically just be reskinning and putting the lore book into actual role-playing game lore books. It would have been so easy. It could have been done in less than 6 months.
It's actually interesting that you keep saying that, because now I'm really tempted to go back and rebuild in World of Darkness, like update it to sci-fi, because honestly, with the new World of Darkness, it would not be too difficult to transition it to
you're talking
universe.
D20 thing? A D20? No.
The new World of Darkness. So D10 system.
Okay, back to D10. Thank you.
Yeah. Because, well, I mean, like the dots for the 2 worlds exist, kind of do the same thing. You would just take driving. Like you would add an extra skill somewhere, probably in physical for starship piloting, maybe mental even.
Yeah.
And you'd add a few skills here and there. The attributes are still fine. You're obviously not going to have vampires, but you could actually like leverage the immortal system or like the specialty system and make Capsuleer into a special race type, just like vampire, werewolf, mage.
There's tons of opportunities in that direction, and I'm sure there's many World of Darkness lore people that would like to get their hands on that and talk about it. But I think we're segueing outside of the realm of some of the people in here.
That's true, but my brain's not cooking on it. So
EVE diehards like me, all I care about is EVE.
Yeah, but I could say the same thing, right? Because I'm not really that much into first-person shooters. But if there was a first-person shooter and there was seamless movement from one brand to another, I would definitely go and try it out. And I think that's what was in the pipes back in the day. It's just that when you put it on an exclusive platform, and most EVE players are hashtag PC Master Race, that's such a mistake.
Yeah, but that discussion's been had many times, but we all understand how much of a mistake it is, but it's too late now.
Oh, Ari, or Danny can't talk now.
Oh no, she lost audio.
Wasn't Danny, weren't you the one that interviewed the CCP dev that worked on World of Darkness and asked them about sparkly vampires? Wasn't that you? I really want to say it was you.
If she lost audio, how can she respond to your question?
Well, because she can type. She just said,
but
"Hold
the
on."
Audience can't hear.
I can echo. I want to know. I don't care about the audience. What are you talking about? I want to know the answer for myself.
Oh, you hear to her first, guys. He doesn't care about the audience.
Yeah, that'll be my Johnny, or not Johnny Pugh, but what's his name? Shoot, the guy from Jeff Rader. Jeff Rader's F the newbies comment.
Oh, I was gonna say a Keemstar comment, like Keemstar, if you know him.
Yes, I remember there was a controversy about that, but I don't remember the details about it.
F the fans.
Oh, right. So, right. So Danny's saying that she's a longtime World of Darkness player. I remember that, but I remember that I swear it was your podcast. You had a CCP dev on, and then like it came out that they used to work for White Wolf, and then the entire interview just got derailed because you guys just started nerding out about vampires and vampire stories. And there was the question. Okay, yeah, it was you. You asked the question about sparkly vampires, and they gave literally the best answer I've ever heard about that, because this is back when Twilight was like the thing. It was like actively in the movie theaters, and they said that what was it? They said, first of all, if that allows somebody to have a better storytelling experience, then by all means, I'll have it in my, whatever it takes to give people the experience that they need in my games, then sure. But they said that if you strip out all of the gimmicks that make Twilight what it is, it's really just a story about a vampire or a girl who's so englamored with a vampire that she doesn't realize how abusive and crazy and sick her relationship with him is. So in that case, really all you're doing is retelling Bram Stoker's Dracula, and that blew my mind.
Astrothy confirmed Twilight fan?
No, I am the opposite.
Okay. You seem to
Can
be
you hear
pretty
me?
aware.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good. So thank you, babe. So sorry about that. My Bluetooth headphones just like crapped out on me. So yes, so I'm a longtime World of Darkness player. I've played World of Darkness, Vampire the Masquerade, Werewolf the Apocalypse since 1999. And so when CCP acquired that title, I was really intrigued and really excited and really invested. But we had this long conversation about what players want, how to bring in new blood, and and he was like, if glamour and pretty is what people want, then we're going to give that to them. They really want to create the type of player experience and the type of depth and immersion that people want. And to tell you the truth, some of the World of Darkness players that I still keep in contact with, that I still talk to, would probably super love that sort of thing, like that personalization of experience. I mean, you have to remember that one of the Vampire the Masquerade clans, the Toreadors, they're just into beautiful things, like so much so that that's their clan flaw. Like when they pass something beautiful, they become mesmerized. So
I'm quite sure that Ash would be a Toreador.
Whoa. Whoa. Shots fired there.
Shots fired, yes.
Let's not talk about my vampire clan right now. That is...
Well, it's either that or Malkavian, but I'm not so sure.
Well, I play mostly New World of Darkness, so...
But I think what Danny's also pointing out is back in the day when the whole walking in station thing and Incarna was introduced. That's also when we got the game The Secret World, and I think many of the people that were disappointed about the fact that Eve did not move in that direction ran off to those type of titles, and I think they've been scattered around the game universe now. And if something like this were to happen, I'm sure that we would pull back all these people, and I'm pretty sure that some of them are actually already back with this alpha thing.
Yeah, well, see, and that's the thing. That's the thing that really tripped me out about CCP a long time. CCP, I feel like when they purchased White Wolf, when they went into Dusk all at the same time, like they really overplayed their hand. We all know that the EVE Online player likes EVE Online. They're very selective about their secondary games. They're very selective about their content, and they want their focus in EVE Online. And I mean, you see that in media, like Talking in Stations last week. You guys mentioned, there was an EVE Online poster who posted another content, and like half of them off the bat were negatives. And that's because EVE Online players don't want that. They, core EVE Online players, they how pretty their characters look is a meme. It's nice, but it's not really. They're there for spaceships. They're there for battles. They're there for meta. They're not like most other players. And so there's been this big push to get this other player group, and I kind of think that CCP is trying to correct that, in that they are now focused on EVE Online. They're focused on Valkyrie, and they're like, okay, let's get to the core EVE Online experience. And now that they're focusing on that core EVE Online experience, they're really digging into the new player experience. They're really digging into mechanics and ships and utilization. And that's why you're seeing that big influx and this new, interest from old players and from new players, because they're getting into, yay, rematch.
I think what you're touching on is the EVE monogamy thing, right? That EVE players tend to be very monogamous when it comes to EVE the game, and whether it's because of spaceship shooting, the PvP, that's the only real universal or global PvP game that actually works, or whether it's the lore or the historicity, the fact that events in EVE actually matters and they become part of a huge narrative. The reasons are not that important. The point is that they are very monogamous, and they want EVE to be the main game. And it was touched upon. I touched upon it helplessly. Helpless self-plug here. I touched upon it in an article on Imperium News about real role play, really. And it was also mentioned by Aerith in the Talking Station show that the Imperium players are very monogamous to EVE, and it's their base. And if they leave, EVE will die. Or at least if that type of player leaves, EVE will be gone.
I think that a big reason why that is that EVE is so dramatically different than other games. And also, like, EVE fulfills on the promise of a lot of games. There's a lot of reasons why EVE is like very, very unique. What that means is that if you're enough to commit it into EVE, if EVE is the thing that attracts you, then generally speaking, you're not as attracted to other games, because one of the big draws about EVE is how different it is from other games. So naturally that kind of polarizes the player base, so that people who are interested in EVE aren't necessarily as interested in other games. I know that when I try to hop streams to somewhere else besides EVE, my viewership definitely drops.
Tanks like a rock.
Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, it's time to do some Skyrim. It'll be great, guys. My viewership goes from like 50 to 2, like literally.
But just in the interest of complete transparency, like, there really is nothing like EVE. I've tried to find something to fill the void. Like I went to the Final Fantasy MMO. I've gone to first person shooters. I try to get lost in Skyrim or Fallout. I've gone to the point where I've started playing DS games, and even like games like Monster Hunter Generations. Hell, I tried Animal Crossing. Like, there's nothing like EVE Online. There's nothing like my spaceships, and or even like EVE Online spaceships, not my spaceships, EVE Online spaceships. I mean, even things like Space Engineers, or there's that other one that I tried, like. EVE Online is just EVE Online. Like, I mean, the meta, the mechanics. I mean, even CCP to a degree, and their personalities. Like, I think on my, you think back on fond memories, like the 07 show. Like, I remember the second 07 show that they ever had, and CCP Fox 4 was on. He took off his shoes. CCP guard stole his shoes, and then at that point, the community tweet fleet started calling him CCP Socks 4. Like, what other game has crap like that? Like, where it's like, I mean, it's so silly, but it's so communal, and it's so connecting. It's like really awesome.
And permanent. Don't forget, it lasted for years.
That's true.
Bring Socks 4 back. Hashtag CCP Socks 4. Yeah.
Well,
He's gone.
To do it.
the thing
Oh,
that-
he's gone now.
Yeah, he left the company, but he left a really good legacy, and he still shows up to events and stuff.
Oh, so Fozzie's just by himself now?
Well,
I mean, he and Fozzie came in at the same time, and they were kind of bros. Like at least that was the bromance that I started in my fan fiction. The CCP Fozzie, CCP Fox 4 fan fiction.
Oh my god, that sounds scary.
No, it's not true.
That's some
She
Brokeback
shipped
Mountain
them.
right there.
I only wrote half of it. No, that doesn't exist. I swear. But aw, that makes me sad.
it's okay. We've got some pretty good guys now. CCP Logibro has really stepped up in a lot of ways. CCP Delegate Zero is really good with the lore. We've gotten a lot of really good new blood.
Yeah, but it is worth mentioning the talent that's been lost, right? Because it's quite a lot, really.
But going back to what you were saying about like our interactions, it reminds me of actually the JITA protests from Incarna, because it was such a surrealistic thing to experience, right? Because at the one hand, a lot of us were really, really angry at CCP for being poor stewards of their own game, not understanding their own game. But at the same time, this game is so magnificent that we were able to take that frustration and do a literal in-game riot and like have the CSM fly in and just like that. Even though it was terrible, what led us to that moment, it was still something that like literally could not happen in basically any other video game. Except for maybe like Ultima Online or something.
And it was very Eve-esque, even though it was extremely infantile and very, very poorly executed.
That's probably exactly why it was Eve-esque.
That is exactly. That is Eve. Like just grown people acting like children over pixels, and it being like a very moving experience. But I mean, I won't lie, like I felt so many emotions when it came out, because on one hand I was like, let's give it a chance, guys, come on, like CCP is trying very hard, but at the same time I'm like, this is bullshit, like this is the worst, this is terrible, why am I in this room, this is crap, why did you waste time on this, I could have had new spaceships, why is this mechanic still buggy, when will you do something about ECM, like, so like I get both sides. I really try
it's
to,
also,
but
it's also a huge problem, right? To analyze the feedback from players. CCP did not have anyone in house to be able to do that, and not in a meaningful way, and that's really a quality assurance problem. I think this brings on the whole thing with the hiring of EA's Maria Sayan.
Well, what was interesting was in response to that, they had to cut a huge portion of their company. And it was considered 10%. A mistake. Yeah, it was considered to be a huge mistake at the time. But ultimately, I think it was a defining moment for EVE. They fired almost their entire PR team. And so what ended up happening was, with an absence of a PR team, the devs themselves started filling in the gaps a little bit. And now they've built up a new PR team, but you still have that kind of that wall broken down between the devs and the players. And of course, CCP Siegel comes in and really solidifies that with her design by participation philosophy. But
isn't it interesting that the gender distribution seems to have changed after that in EVE or in CCP?
Well, I mean, not like you can actually, not only that. So they started to diversify their devs. They started to bring in more player devs. So, you saw CCP Fox 4, you saw Verone come in, or CCP Falcon, you saw Fozzie come in, you saw CCP Rise come in. And so you had all of these players who were ingratiated in the game and who were FCing, coming into the game, but you also had CCP starting to take an interest. So like eVegas, the first two eVegases were player run, and now CCP has taken over that. I did an event in Austin, and CCP, with their old PR team, Mike Reed, and CCP Guard helped me out. They had 9 devs here for GDC Online, and those 9 devs showed up to the event. And so you really start to see this change in culture, as a whole. And I mean, it was really unfortunate that it took Afnar and his $1,000 Japanese designer jean pants blog post for it to make it happen. I mean, it was a very low point, but I mean, it was almost a cultural revolution when it came to how CCP views its community and how CCP listens and takes into account their community. Because you see, when all these players come in, CCP Fozzie made a point to say, guys, we want your criticisms. We want to hear your voices, but we need you to do it in these constructive fashions. We're going to start these threads, post the issue, post this, post constructively. Don't just shit post in them. You start to really see this revolution and this want to listen to the players and see the CSM becoming more than just this PR stunt. They were actually starting to listen and to take them into account. And, you started having the Matani come, and then people, alliances were starting to really vie for positions and to really scrutinize who was on the CSM and what they were doing. What was it? A couple years after that, you had people getting kicked off of the CSM for like not pulling their weight, which, in talking to these CSM members, you would hear so much about, oh yeah, we have all of these reports we need to write. All of our recaps are going to be 3, 4, 6 months late because people aren't pulling their weight. And now that's just not, well, from what I understand, it's gotten to a point where that's not acceptable. And so it really,
I think it's an important point that you're making there with the CSM, that after that, they took the CSM a lot more serious. And that's also why it then ended up being gamified a little bit, right?
Exactly.
Well, yeah, and there has been a couple of, I think, coming to Jesus moments for the CSM as it evolved. Like CSM 6 dealing with the Incarna crisis definitely was a huge defining moment for them. But one of the more interesting things that I think happened was like with CSM 7, and I think it was even more 8, where there wasn't a big crisis. And then there was the question of, well, what does the CSM do if they're not negotiating a crisis? And I think that that's really when we started figuring out how the CSM can be useful. That's when we started thinking about, and then of course, last year there was all the drama llamas. So it's like, well, what do we do with a CSM that can't be trusted? And that was another really important question. And I think that from that, we've figured out that CSM acts as a conduit for public discussion. And I think that that's pretty good role for it right now.
But that's all the history lessons. I think we should talk a little bit more about the future. Do you think we're going to get the whole vision redone? Is that what's actually going on now? Because I've been trying to follow this, and I know my tinfoil hat gets very big at sometimes, but it seems as if there's so much stuff happening with the brand expansions, with the new London office, with Hilma moving. Is this a remake of the old Incarna vision or the old expansive vision of CCP? I don't know if it's going to be walking in stations and Incarna, but they seem to be moving things forward in a big way.
Yeah, so one of the things that I've always tracked CCP's kind of theology for is you go to their website and you see what it is that they're putting up front. And for up until Ascension, the shtick was the largest living sci-fi universe. And I really think that right there, that line is kind of CCP Seagull's goal. Goal, yeah. And then now the new one says, your journey, one universe, the future of Eve is here. And what I think is good about that is that what we're discovering now, this last year, more than ever, is that when you strip away all of the bullcrap, when you strip away the bad mechanics, and when you strip away the drama, what you really have is a game that allows us to tell our stories. And that's what makes it unique. When all these people have been saying all these years, what is Eve? And really what it is it's a story building engine. And so the focus, and you can see it especially in like their current advertisements. Their advertisements for the game don't show the game. Like they there's nothing about the new explosions or anything like that. It's these people's stories, and it's designed to inspire you. You hear these things that people do, and you think to yourself, I want to be able to do things like that.
And that's why I'm bringing it up, because I know that you also noticed the Hilmer presentation at DICE, right? Where he's talking about this huge virtual reality vision of the future and Dyson spheres and yeah, lots of very weird, almost transhumanist stuff. But the point is that what you walk away with is that when we finish this whole expansion of the Eve universe, the next steps will be something in those lines, right? The one player, one story, one universe. It just seems to be that something big is on the way, whether it's next year or 2 years from now. I don't know, but it definitely looks like they're revisioning or rebuilding the old vision.
I just want to say that Crazy Loca is in chat. That's it. I'm just letting you know he's in chat.
He should be in voice.
Well, and
I have no idea who he is, but they're talking about like Twitch chat and the relationship between different Twitch chats from different games. So sorry, it was an inside joke.
So what I would say to that is I think CCP is finally getting a clue, because if you look at any of the old articles from like PC Gamer or Overall Games Media, you know, it's always stories about EVE Online feature two things: big fleet battles, and then these little isolated incidents that happen to specific people. So someone getting a huge scam, or just like one pilot losing a bunch of plex in a ship, or one pilot losing a very expensive ship. And so for so long, CCP has tried to figure out, you know, how do we get people to connect to Eve? How do we get people to connect to Eve? And it's not, you know, your avatar. It's not that. It's your experience. And so I think that they finally figured that out and tapped into it in a way to market the game to other people.
And then I think the important part is that they have finally figured out that it's us that matter, that it's us making the game. It's our stories. So if you look at the two most recent promotional videos where it's actually real Eve players, but it throws back to the original pirate video of the very early launch of Eve, and it throws back to the I Was There video, right? It's very much the same thing and the same theme, but this time it's not a fake character created by CCP. This time it's an actual real Eve identity.
Exactly. And that's, you know, when we talk about the drama and this, like, it's the people. We want to hear those names. You know, who doesn't love hearing a great story involving Grath Telkin or Shadu or the Matan? You know, that's what we love.
Because they are real. Love. We can go and talk to them. We can go and even troll them or whatever we want to do. They are something we can interact with, and in that way, they are real.
Right. These stories are not just something that has happened. It's things that happen.
Who joined?
Sorry. My kitty is begging for attention.
the mini-me's. There's more and more of those showing up in Eve. Where's Seek, by the way?
Butt in my face.
But at the same time, I think that like everything where we are at now is definitely a result of how we got here. You know, as you said, it harkens back to those things. But a lot of those things, like the This Is Eve trailer, not This Is Eve trailer, but the I Was There trailer, which it also harkens back to, a lot of people didn't like that. A lot of people didn't like Incarna. A lot of people didn't like Aurum when it first came out. A lot of people didn't like a lot of these things that are now really terrifically successful at this point. And so what I think that they've done is they've really gone back to these different pieces and gone, well, what went wrong? And how do we make sure that it doesn't happen again? And the good news is that they've got plenty to draw on.
You're right.
and it ties into... I don't know. Was that the Mitani that said that some of the things that that CCP has done is a mistake because they listen to players when they say something that's counter to what players actually want because they don't really know themselves. And the things that CCP ignore are the things that are vital points that players make that actually is a fact that they should change. So it's figuring out when should they listen and when should they ignore us. And it is a very, very difficult job to figure out what's what.
It is a fine line.
Go ahead, Danny.
No, I was just going to say it is a fine line. And that's the thing. Like, you have multiple factions in EVE who do want all different things. You know, the needs of high sec players, the needs of low sec players, the needs of null sec players, the needs of new players versus the needs of veteran players. There are a lot of factors that you need to account for. And it can be very hard to know exactly what the game needs at what time.
The vocal minority is very dangerous. That's why they have to look at player stats. You know, what changes increase logons, which changes decrease logons, and that's what they got to focus on. So, them listening to the vocal minority is dangerous.
But it's also tied into the silent majority, right? Because sometimes when they then say something or do something and voice an opinion, if CCP then changes that, then that opinion might actually have been wrong because they don't really want that change. They just think they do.
There's also been a lot of things in which CCP has had to intentionally take a lot of flack for in order to do something that was ultimately better for the situation. Like I like to point to like the Phoebe jump changes, right? Nobody, obviously it was incredibly unpopular. A lot of people still crap on it, but if you look back to the dev blogs and the concerns that people had prior to Phoebe jump changes when it comes to power projection and all that stuff, you can't argue that they haven't fixed those problems. It's just the process of doing that was less enjoyable for the people who were capitalizing, no pun intended, on the strength of power projection. The new SOV system is also kind of in that same line where people just now are starting to say, you know what, I'm starting to see the fun in Fuzzy SOV. You know, I've heard that actually quite a bit more in the last couple of months. It's not saying that it's perfect, but if you look back at what the problems that were there before, you cannot argue that the solutions don't fix those problems. They may create new problems.
It's very Eve, babe.
Say?
No, sorry. I was making a comment.
Oh.
Well, it's like the saying about democracy. It's not a perfect system, but it's better than all the alternatives, right?
Yes. Also, Google Docs are spreadsheets. Don't make a false equivalent, or don't separate the two, Rodin.
The spreadsheet in space thing is really such an old rumor. It's not true. It's only true if you want to, game things to death.
I try to argue that point, and then somebody points out to me that the overview is just a spreadsheet, and then I go, okay, well, whatever.
Oh, the UI thing? Yeah, I'm sure that the people that actually designed the UI in EVE originally, way back in the day, were very, very spreadsheet-centric, but I think we're moving away from that finally.
Yeah, but the problem is that that's actually been a thing that's literally been as long as I've been in the game, which is that everybody kind of wants a better overview, but then when you say, okay, well, what does a better overview look like? Nobody really has a really good answer for that. Like, the overview needs to give you a lot of really good organized information really fast, and a spreadsheet's really good for that.
Yeah, but I think the thing is that this ties into the whole thing about having guides and information in space instead. In other games, all that type of information is handled by markers in sound or visuals, and not in some sort of list-like format.
It's true. Sorry.
Well, and you say in sounds and visuals, but like how can sound really work when you really, in order to be successful in EVE in a lot of these battle scenarios, you need your voice comm. So a lot of people don't play, EVE with sound. So how would that work? That would put, PvPers at a disadvantage.
I think that's a matter of technology. The fact that most players in EVE play with 2 screens, and then maybe the next step is to play with 2 audio devices. I don't know, but it could be that's the solution.
I don't know if I could argue that most players play with 2 screens. I think that goes back to the silent majority, vocal minority kind of thing. But I will say that there are already examples of that being in the game perfectly successfully. For example, wormholes. The best way to determine that something has happened is that you hear the sound of the wormhole activation. So there are definitely the use of sound for kind of cues. But I would say that the biggest difference between, like, say, World of Warcraft, which has a lot of like in space or spatial cues to do things, as opposed to generic UI cues to do things, like EVE, the difference is that your ability to respond to those in-universe or in-world interactions are far greater in something like World of Warcraft. So, like you see those. The big example would be the spheres, the disruption spheres for the new motherships. It's not like it's incredibly easy or trivially easy to navigate yourself out of those bubbles if you even identify that warning.
Yeah, and if you start thinking about adding these things as visuals or audio cues, you run into some other problems, right? I think was it Antiquarian that was doing that explanation of one of the features that was removed because it was a visual thing about a state effect or something like that in space. But and they were testing it and it worked fine. But when they scaled it up to more than 20 or 25 people, the server and the client actually started being a little bit strained. And then someone just reminded him, well, you do know that EVE players actually have 100 versus 100 battles. So this is not going to work.
Right. There's just so many ways in which it kind of breaks down. That's why I advocate moving more and more information off of the overview. Like, for instance, tracking information onto the lock target reticule.
How much do you think people have right to saying, like casuals who see EVE and they look at it, how much of a right do you think they have saying, there's too much information on the screen, too many buttons?
Are you working?
I think that I don't know if it's necessarily that they should have a right to have it be changed or something just because they like it. I think it definitely hints to the depth of things. But this goes back to the difference between alpha clones, which is that the best advice that I can give to people is if you don't understand something about EVE right now, don't worry about it. If it's not currently in your exact scope, then don't necessarily worry about it. Just realize that there are infinite levels of depth beyond where you are right now, and just worry about where you are right now. Like, if you don't understand what angular velocity is, whatever. If all you can figure out is lock, orbit, shoot, then that's really all you need for right now. Once you get comfortable with that, then you're naturally going to become curious and familiar with and grow into deeper and deeper knowledge.
But the point is valid, right? I think Johnny has some point.
It's approach, lock, orbit, shoot.
Oh, right. Yeah, sorry.
I think I think the swarming of information is a really valid point, and it's something to do with UI design, and it's something that we see in all manner of software creation, because we have so much possible now with our modern computers, right? So they need to come up with a UI design that does not overwhelm people. I think it's very similar to what happened in the Microsoft Office package, right? That they've moved all the information onto different panes or whatever in their menu system, so you only get the options when you need them. You don't have to look at them all the time, because then you feel as if it's just noise and you're overwhelmed and you don't actually know where to find the features that you need specifically right now. I think EVE has a similar problem, that it's got too much information up there at all times instead of making it into specific sections. So when you're docked, or when you are opening the market, or when you're opening industry, the things that are related to that should stay in those realms and not be up in your face all the time.
Yeah, but back in the day, the player base would just explode if they thought that they were losing access to something. at all times. That was one of the big failures of captain's quarters, was that people were upset and said that they didn't want any functionality to require the captain's quarters, because they're afraid of their ability to like quick shift into different ships or whatever it is. And ultimately CCP acquiesced to that, and that's one of the reasons why captain's quarters failed so miserably, because there was no value to it, because they didn't have any. Everything about it was just, it was a fluffy thing that wasn't necessary, but it was because people demanded it be not necessary.
Yeah, it didn't help that the character moves around like a fucking snail. So the whole idea of having a mind palace-like environment to run around to the different features, if you can't even run, then you're really fucked, right?
Right.
Our brains have the ability to adapt to a lot of information before us. You see it even in your everyday life. You just don't notice the things that are always there that you don't always use. You're not overwhelmed by the amount of information. So people who are complaining about such things or having a difficulty, they haven't given their brain enough time to start ignoring the information that's not important. And yet they also don't have enough time to even decide what information is important to the current situation that they're in. Our brains can handle that stuff. They just, today's gaming environment doesn't teach people to let their brains do that for them.
No, but they need to be conditioned to it, right? And they usually need to do that in a pace that makes sense. And I do think that if you came straight from another game and into EVE now, you would be overwhelmed. It's not just that every avenue and option is open to you, it's also that you then get all this information to handle that you don't understand. And I think, of course, some of it will be alleviated by players actually helping each other out. But again, this actually damages player retention, because you need to slowly condition yourself into something.
It does, because there are so many options out there. People, gaming options, entertainment options. People are very willing to just say, this isn't really something I'm looking for. I'm just going to go play something else that's easier. And that's what happens.
And that's what could be helped a little bit if we maybe eased people into this by splitting it up into the different brands and splitting the functionalities up into specific locations. And back to the whole Mind Palace idea. I really like the idea of the captain's quarters. It's just that the way it was implemented was basically disappointing so many people. Danny already touched upon why it disappointed people, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't have value still. It's just that it's implemented very poorly.
Yeah, I agree. I remember going around that map, that captain's quarter for the first time, seeing how far I had to walk to access certain features. Like, this is such a waste of time. It would make more sense to have like a virtual hologram appear, and then you could quickly click on everything right away, everything that's available in the captain's quarters, not have to walk to each individual spot to do it.
So there's a really simple...
No, and it wasn't like a quick sprint. It was that slow stroll where you're just wavering. And then,
it's like, I just want to get to the ship thing. And it's like, no, why does it take so long?
It's like, why? And then there were so many missed marks. Like that giant TV, it took the player base, like basically hacking into the system to figure out you could upload your own YouTube videos or whatever. Why?
Now they changed that, Danny. They fixed it. Yeah, they've put in a new type of video player that actually works universally in the captain's quarters environment. So it's not the BIK format. It's a new format, and it's the same that they're using to do the tutorial stuff. So the native videos in the EVE client is actually running on that platform. And it's also why players can now submit stuff, advertising content and stuff like that, and it will be streamed from the server into the client. So there's a lot of potential in there. It's just that I'm not certain where it's going. It seems weird that they have spent all that dev time on fixing some of the things in the captain's quarters, and now I'm hearing people talk about the fact that they might be pulling it out entirely and removing it. It's like, what?
What? And see, and that's the thing. It's like there have already been so many dev hours put into it. At least like just leave it in there as like a grandfathered whatever. Like, you don't have to develop it anymore, but don't. I mean, that's like so much time and energy and effort into that. And I mean, it was such a to do. Like, why?
If it ruins the overall image of the game or the experience, then that lost time that you spent, that lost value is justifiable. I personally delete tons of videos over the years that I've made to my YouTube channel just because these particular videos don't go towards my overall image that I wanted to present on my YouTube page. And so it was more valuable for me to get rid of that stuff.
Yeah, but if you take the
gain a greater image.
If you take the captain's quarters, the fact that they added this new video feature and you have these player created things that are submitted and it's up on that screen, it's like, yeah, but that's not where I want it. I want to actually be able to see it up close or have it running maybe with audio, and then I have to run all the way back to the captain's quarters. But yeah, you can't run.
Well, so there's an additional problem called accretion, which actually Extra Credits just literally made a video on us this last week, where basically more features as a product goes through its life cycle, more and more features will be added onto it. And some of those features won't necessarily work out, and sometimes they're just kind of left in. And sometimes more features will be added in as kind of like a stopgap or a fix to something else. The example that they use in the video is like they break their currency, and so then they release a different currency that buys all the new stuff and therefore invalidates the old broken currency, for example. And so accretion kind of builds up on both MMOs and even other products like Civilization or anything that has like a feature set or like a large feature set game. But EVE is pretty decent at preventing accretion. The things that are added to the game are generally accepted as being meaningful. PI may suck, but it still has a valid purpose within the game. There's not much in the game that is kind of just vestigial. And so especially as we move into a free-to-play market, as a producer of a free-to-play game, you have to have certain priorities. And one of those priorities is this long-term kind of war against things like that. And so I could definitely understand, like, from a high-level designer, like CCP Siegel kind of level of design, you have to go, well, the captain's quarters were great, but if it doesn't provide anything, then all it can possibly be is a distraction.
Yeah, exactly. And what was it? Seabass said it exactly, the sunken cost fallacy. Some people will get in the mode that I put so much value into something, I can't possibly get rid of it, that I'll be losing that value. And that's not true. Yeah, you'll lose the value, but the effect after the fact is far more valuable than that lost value.
Yeah, I was
pointing out that it was not a sunken value thing. It's the fact that it's an unfinished prototype. And so much, even though Ash says that it's not vestigial, I think a lot of things in EVE are severely vestigial, and it's very much unfinished ideas that looked very good on paper, and it might actually have been a success if it was implemented correctly. But because there's some small tweaks needed or repolishing, then it just gets left hanging.
Right. And what I mean is, when I say vestigial, I mean it basically no value added. Not that it was broken. Like for instance, Cosmos missions. Cosmos missions are totally broken right now, but they're still useful. They're still good to be a thing in the game. It'd be nice if they could fix them. But Captain's Quarters would have to basically have a whole new product offering in order to
it needs running, it needs animations, and it needs the ability to invite other people. Otherwise it's useless. It's the same with things like opportunities. They added in opportunities, and that looked pretty cool. It's kind of like achievements, but they didn't continue adding new opportunities to make it an actual feature. So there's a lot of stuff like that that's only vestigial and never gets finished. I don't know if the NPE is going to be different, but I'm just a little bit afraid that it might actually end up similar in that way, where you get this 2-hour stuff and then that's it.
I cannot believe that is true. And just because of how much that they know that experience is important and how much they are using it as a launching platform for their new PvE rework all total. Like this is not a one and done deal as far as I'm concerned.
I hope you're right. It's just that a lot of stuff seems to be added as primarily a marketing value, where it's part of a patch or a new launch of stuff that, there's all this new shiny stuff, but it doesn't get finished.
Well, I mean, we have seen more doubling back recently. I mean, like structures have obviously seen quite a few fixes over the last few months, and will continue to get feature built up feature wise. It sucks that we can't do insurance, but a few months ago we also couldn't do contracts. So we're trending in a positive direction. As far as the MPE goes,
again, I don't agree, and this is because I'm very biased. The fact that Eve players have been talking about what features might be needed to actually take over more of the, say, financial product development, and things like insurance was a huge thing a few years back. Players have tried to create a player-driven insurance system many times. Some things don't belong in CCP hands, and they should listen to players when they say, we need tools for this.
Right. Well, I think so there's two issues there. There's the technical limitation of whether or not they've managed to make insurance as it currently exists work also in a Citadel, and for whatever reason they need to work on that a little bit more. But then there's the question of what to do with insurance, or how to hand things over to the player base. But I think that a lot of that comes from the old days of CCP, where there was kind of these goals that had no path towards realization. Like, of course, we want players to take over insurance. We want players to take over police and customs work, all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, like, to make it work in a way that isn't awful, like war decks. War decks serve a function. That's why they still exist. But that function is nowhere close to what you would think about conceptually what that its function would be if you were to design that feature, right? Like, we want people to have wars in order to, facilitate grievances in HiSec. Well, that isn't really what it's used for. It's really used for like content creation in HiSec, and also to drive otherwise lackadaisical corporations to have to either nut up or shut up. It has its value, which is why it doesn't get removed. But at the same time, getting that idea of like players should be able to exert their grievances upon each other isn't that easy of a system. Bounty is another good example of that, where it didn't quite hit its design goals. And I'm afraid that something like player-owned or player-built insurance would be if it was mechanically built in and not just devised by players, which SRP really is kind of that already. If CCP tried to give...
We need something that's player versus player or business to business centric. But every time that players talk about features and things that needs to be implemented in the client to actually make that possible, CCP tends to ignore it because they say that it's a too small segment that's going to use this. That's a circular argument, right? Of course, if players have only got an NPC option, they're going to choose that over a player-driven option. And that's whether you're talking about casinos or stocks and shares and bonds and loans and all these things that should be a part of EVE and should have been so for 10 years ago.
I agree, but like I said, like the problems, I think that the idea that the reason why it's not done is because CCP is ignoring it is potentially a misnomer.
No, it's because they under prioritize it. Now, I've been raging about player-to-player billings recently because it's something that I think should have been in there 10 years ago. The fact that I can get a bill from an NPC, but I can't send one to a player, that makes no sense to me. It should have been thought and conceptualized into the same system. So whether it's a bill from an NPC or a bill from a player, it should be on the same database calls, and the only thing that changes is the sender and receiver IDs, right? This should not have been rocket science.
By the same logic, Logi should be able to be calculated on somehow on kill mails too. But I mean, for various reasons, there are different. I don't know. My point. I go back to the point where CCP has clearly not been resting on their laurels. So it's difficult. Like I'm willing to say that yes, it's something that should definitely be prioritized, or that it's a good thing, and maybe it's time to look at from CCP. But to imply that they're ignoring things or like not getting things done fast enough, as a software developer, like I know how these things work. Like the timetables get delayed by their very necessity.
Okay, let me just push on that a little bit, right? I was promised a dedicated mining frigate when I was on the Proto CSM, and Torfi promised this. It took 10 years for them to implement it. Is that not a little bit unfair?
Well, I think it's unfair to judge the current CCP grade by what happened years before most of the staff that are currently working on it were doing anything. You also said that, they said, oh, it only infects a small subset of people. Siegel stomped that notion out with her idea of content creators and supporting them. I mean, the whole POS revamp, the whole corp revamp, which hopefully is still ongoing, but was a prioritized by her, is based on the idea that they realize that the things that impact few people, those few people that get impacted are the people that build the stuff for everyone else. So,
yeah. Well, no. So I was listening to the show last week, and someone from Mini Love was on. And I just had, I got this kind of feeling in one of the conversations that CCP doesn't like griefers anymore. Like the whole idea of there's no space in EVE Online being safe, and that they're kind of pushing back on this. I was just curious, like what's the landscape? Like, you guys are talking about more mechanics, but what's the landscape of the idea of free for all gameplay? Like, you can literally do whatever you want to do. If you want to be a pirate, if you want to be a griefer, if you want to be a scammer, like, it doesn't matter. EVE Online accepts all types. Like, with the influx of new players, is CCP becoming more guarded? Are they kind of pushing back against that kind of gameplay?
Like, they have to take that discussion needs to be had again, right? Because if we're getting a lot of new blood, of course the veterans will already have been through all this and figured out how do you acclimatize to a global PvP centric game, right? But with new blood, they might not actually understand that yet, and that means that CCP needs to be a little bit defensive and not choose sides too much. So it's going to be a little bit of a knife's edge balance in the discussion, I think.
The detail that I will point to as my example was that when players were concerned that alpha clones will be used for high-sec ganking far too much, CCP's response was to not lock alphas to safety and instead say that they were willing to if it ended up becoming a big enough problem. CCP are definitely still supportive of those kinds of gameplay, but I think that the designers understand that gankers have a suppressing attitude. They appreciate the relationship, the ecological relationship between gankers and miners and whatnot a lot more than they used to. One thing that I have noticed that CCP ties into a lot is the Bartle's taxonomy, where there's killers and there's achievers and so on and so forth. And so when they're building new features, they're building it out for all those play sets. And so in the same way, I think that they have definitely they have not pulled back on the fact that you can be a dastardly guy. But I actually think that the player base itself has shifted more towards a cooperative mentality as opposed to a destructive mentality.
Just because you grief, it doesn't mean you're dastardly. I
said destructive.
Oh, okay.
You are destructive either way.
That's true, but isn't that? No, I'm going to sound very arrogant and very, very jerkish, but I mean it with the purest of intentions. Isn't that a necessary service in EVE Online? Like, with the mythos of EVE and with the environment that EVE has, like you said, there is an ecosystem. Like, it's just like life, sometimes there's in the matter of philosophy, there's this view that you need the bad in order to enjoy the good. And I say that with all the best intentions. When my very, very first start in EVE Online, before I started PvPing and all that stuff, I needed to train my skills up. So the people that I was going to play with were busy off in low sec, already hunting and all that stuff. So while my skills were training, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna become an industry tycoon, and I'm gonna go to low sec, and I'm gonna mine Kernite. But there was this rush of going from point 0.5 space to 0.4 space because I knew it was more dangerous. I knew, there was this chance that some pirate was going to come and blowing me up in my little Caldari frigate with my hull full of Kernite, and they might steal my Kernite, and then I'd have to go get another ship and all that stuff. And so when I absconded with my cargo holds full of precious minerals, it made that victory a little more sweeter. And so it's like, while I do enjoy ganking, and I can see how it can be, oppressive to the player base, like I do feel like there needs to be that kind of nip at the heels, because in EVE Online there is not supposed to be a safe space. So even though you're in high sec, even though Concord is there should still be that element of danger and that element of real loss. Even for new players.
Well,
even for new players.
What's funny is that, especially with the mining revamp and Rorqual revamp, I've been talking to a lot more miners and industrialists than I ever have before. And a lot of them make that argument that's like, oh, well, I should be able to fit all of these things on my ship. Like, why do I have to sacrifice this? Or why do gankers, I should have more protection from gankers. But here's the thing. If those threats didn't exist, then your choices would become meaningless, right? Like
exactly.
if the threat of gankers didn't exist, then everybody would just be in maximum yield hulks, and that would just be the end answer. That threat needs to exist for the game to be exciting, even for jump freighters, right? Like like actual space truckers exist because the situation is dangerous. If it wasn't dangerous, then everybody would just do it themselves, or they would autopilot, or whatever. That threat gives you something that you have to compensate for. And the fact that it's a player-built threat means that you can't guarantee that it'll happen. So what ends up happening is that you take measures to defend yourself, and then there's no attack, and then you wonder whether or not those measures were worthwhile, and now you've got to make further choices, and there's all this sort of stuff. So the threat, I didn't say oppress, I said suppressed by hostile actions. And that's important, because the way you operate when being suppressed by an aggressive agent is very telling of who you are in EVE.
Sorry, no, I agree with you, but I guess I don't know. In their conversation, they were talking about CCP banning people for no reason, and I guess I tend to take that with a grain of salt, because who knows what actually happened, sometimes, and you never know what any one person, you never know what any one person is doing. It is EVE Online, except everyone, trust no one. Like that's always been my motto, like to a fault.
Hey guys, I appreciate this, but I got a jet.
Well then we should just close it out.
Say again?
I said then we should just close out the show. It's been 3 hours.
You don't want to talk with me, Danny?
I do, but don't you have like family stuff? Like, don't you have like loved ones?
Oh, it's Saturday. I'm single.
I would love to talk with you, Johnny, but it's been 3 hours.
That's fine.
Maybe we can all do it again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. Johnny and Danny. Oh, it looks like Caleb's already headed out. It's been a wonderful discussion. Thank you, Matterall, for getting this all together.
Yes, thank you, Matterall, for hosting and for being so patient. And I'm sorry for like cursing all over your stream.
All right, well, I guess that about wraps it up. So this has been the Talking in Stations After Hours. On behalf of Danny, Johnny, looks like Joe Public, Caleb, Matterall, and whoever else dropped in, and all the people in Twitch chat who have contributed to this conversation, thank you all for watching, and we will see you next time.